Welcome to another show. I'm Sid, and there's no preview today, but if I got everything right, then you should see a little window here with the final result in it. Today we're going to be playing around with mirrors, opacity, and a few other patches to create an expanded version of some of the tutorials I've showed you previously. So let's just get started. First thing I'm going to do is add in some of the patches we'll be using. So if we hit library down here, we can go to patch assets. I'm going to be using the mirror patch, so we're going to add that first of all, just the regular one here created by Spark AR. So import that into your scene. We're also going to be using the RGB shift, so I'll grab that one too. RGB color shift, import that. And finally, I'm going to grab the adjust colors patch too. So we'll type in adjust and we'll grab that one. Import that into your scene, and once you have those, you can close this window and we can do some more stuff. Next up, we're going to add some elements to our scene. So up here in the scene panel, we're going to right click and add a canvas with a rectangle inside of it. If you add a rectangle, it will appear already nested inside the canvas, so you can skip that step. Then we're going to fill the width and fill the height. Now I'm going to duplicate that with Command D. You can also right click and hit the duplicate button here. And then we're going to rename that mirror, and we're going to rename this one mirror 2. Now you want to add a material for each and just rename those appropriately. So we'll call this one mirror matte, and we'll add a second one here for our other mirror, which we'll rename mirror 2 matte. Now we're going to come up here to the camera and we're going to add a texture extraction. So hit that plus button and it will appear down here in the assets panel. This is the camera texture. And we're going to take both of these, select both of them, and just add the camera texture to both. Next up, we're going to add some interactions for our mirror. So if we take the camera texture here and drag it inside of the patch editor, and also take this mirror shader and drag it in as well, we can connect this RGBA output here to the texture input of our mirror shader. And we're going to be using a screen pan, so that when the user swipes their finger left or right across the screen, it will cycle through each of the mirror styles that we have available. To do that, we're going to double tap and add a screen pan patch. And then from the gesture state, we're going to drag out and add a counter that will appear with this pulse already connected in between. So that's good. And from here, you want to drag out and connect an add patch. Now, all of these patches appear wildly far away from where they should be, which is kind of frustrating. So just move them into place, get things nice and tidy. What we're going to do is increase the maximum count here from 5, which is the default, to 12, which represents the 12 mirror styles that we have available. And we're also going to increase the second value here of our add patch to 1. That way it will cycle through the first one and it won't have that weird skipping effect that you might have seen in my previous video. Next, we're going to connect this output here from add to the mirror styles input. And now we're going to select our 2 mirror materials, add patches for the texture, and get both of those connected up here. So we'll connect that one and we can connect that one as well. And you'll be able to see that both layers now, when we simulate touch, can swipe through left and right to go back and forward. And you'll see the number adjusting here. So we can swipe through and change the different mirror styles that we have available. It's pretty sweet, but now we're going to add even more cool stuff. So I'll just organize this a little bit, zoom out and drag these over here, move this down a little bit and just pull it off to the left because we're not going to be using it again. Everything's connected up right. Next up, we're going to add our adjust color shader patch. So drag that inside of your patch editor and we're going to connect from the mirror shader output to the texture input on this patch. Now we're going to take the output from this patch and connect it to the first mirror material up here. It's actually the one sitting beneath this layer, so you won't see any of these changes when we start adjusting the values, but you will in a minute, and that's going to be the next part of this effect. So once again, I'll zoom out, I'll make a little bit more space, and we can pull this up here and make sure that everything is pretty obvious as to where it's connected. So now what we can do is hide this second mirror, the one sitting on top. I'll make that invisible for the time being. And if we adjust some of these values now, for example, this invert boolean, we can check that box and you'll see it inverts the colors of our current layer. You can also go through and make changes to all of these. You can adjust the values from 0 to 1. So just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to adjust all of the values to be at 0.5, just so that you can see roughly what it looks like when you start playing around. But obviously, do some experimentation, see what you're happy with. I'm not going to change the brightness because if I change that to 0.5, you'll see it becomes very washed out and you can't actually see what's going on. If I uncheck this box and invert the colors back, then you'll see it's extremely bright and doesn't look that good at all. So I'm going to leave the brightness here at 0 and I'm just going to put everything else to be 0.5. So now we get this kind of trippy photo negative effect, which I really like. And now if I make this second layer visible again, then it will appear on top and you will no longer be able to see that effect underneath, which is what we're now going to get into. So the second material here, we're going to add an opacity feature, which means that when you tap on the screen, it will slowly disappear and you'll be able to see what's underneath, and it will cycle through that range of opacity going up and down. And when the user taps on the screen, it will pause at a particular point and it's going to look cool. Trust me. So for this, we're actually going to drag a second mirror shader patch inside of our editor, and we'll get that connected up to the same screen pan setup we've already created. So connect that to your mirror styles input here. Drag that over, give myself a little bit more space. And now from this output, we're going to add a swizzle. We're actually going to need two of those, so I'm going to Control C and Control V to copy and paste that. And we'll get this one connected up to the same value input. Now by default, the swizzle value is set at X, but we're going to change this top one here to RGB and this lower one here to A, because ultimately we're pulling data from our camera, and the RGBA represents the red, green, blue and alpha channels of our camera texture. Now from the alpha swizzle, we're going to drag out and connect a multiply patch, and from the output of that, we're going to create a pack. Now by default, the pack is set to be a vector 3, but if we drop down this menu, we can change it to a vector 2. And what I'm actually going to do is take this connection here and move it from the top input to the second input of our pack. Now we can take our RGB swizzle and connect the output from there to the top input of our pack. Now what I'm going to do is disconnect this mirror 2 material texture, which was previously connected to this mirror shader setup that we had. And I'm just going to disconnect that, drag it over here and connect it up to the output from our pack. Now it may look like I've broken everything, but that's actually my mistake. I didn't connect from this RGBA output of our camera texture the same way I did with this mirror shader. You want to connect from here to the texture input of the second mirror shader that we've added. Now I'm just going to quickly reorganize things and tidy it up so that you can see all the connections more clearly. Okay, that's looking better. Now what we're going to do is add the interaction for our user to tap on the screen and adjust the opacity of the layer that we've just set up with swizzles so that it alternates between a range of 0 and 1, and you can see the other mirror layer underneath. In order to do that, we're going to add a screen tap, so double tap and add a screen tap patch. And from the gesture state output here, we're going to add a switch. And from the on-off output of our switch, we're going to add a loop animation. And finally, from the progress of our loop animation, we're going to connect a transition. Now, once again, by default, the transition is set to be a vector 3. But if we drop that down to a number, then we can connect from the value output here to the second value input of our multiply patch. And now you'll immediately see the change. Our bottom layer is visible and this other one is invisible because we now have it connected up to a user interaction. So now if I tap on the screen, you'll see that the visibility here is changing. The transition is going from 0 to 1, which is no visibility, to full visibility. And it's happening in a duration of 1 second. If we change that duration from 1 to say 5, then you'll be able to see things happening a little bit slower. And we can also mirror it, which means it will go all the way through from a range of 0 to 1, and then rather than starting back at 1 and going through again, it will just reverse from 1 back down to 0. So now you'll see it alternating between the top layer, which is just an ordinary camera texture effect with a mirror filter applied, and this second mirror shader, which sits underneath and has the adjust color shader with all the values that we've changed. And if we swipe through, then you'll see it works on all of the different styles of mirror. So we can leave it on that one and it will alternate between the foreground and the background layer by adjusting the opacity of this top layer in a range of 0 to 1. If I switch over to the FaceTime camera now, then you'll be able to see the effect in full swing. You'll also be able to see me in bed, again, being kind of lazy. But I think it's pretty sweet, and if we tap on the screen, it will pause it in place. We can still swipe through and create some pretty trippy visuals, I think. Swipe through again, and if we hit tap on the screen, then it will start alternating. You can pause it halfway through if you want. You can pause it when it's just a regular mirror. So just to summarize everything that I've shown you today, we have two rectangles here with mirror materials and connected up to these mirror shaders, which creates this kind of effect here. We've added a screen pan effect here, which runs through a counter to alternate between different mirror styles by swiping on the screen. We've added an adjust color shader to one of our materials, which creates this trippy effect on one of our layers. And we've also added an opacity setup to our other mirror shader, the layer which is sitting on top here, mirror 2. And we've added swizzles, multipliers, and all kinds of cool stuff with this loop animation that alternates between the visibility of that layer. So as you tap on the screen, it will pause in place and you can stay with this effect, or you can tap it again and it will go back to being just an ordinary mirror. Hopefully you found something in this video useful. I did have to start again at one point because of technical issues, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit convoluted and maybe confusing in parts, but if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel. I try to make tutorials as often as I can. I have a series called Favorite Filters where I showcase some of the cool effects that I've found on Instagram, and yeah, leave a comment, let me know what you want to see in the next video. Hopefully you're all having a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.